Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as being the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is our good friend, esteemed colleague, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We have a lot of topics to discuss today. I want to begin by what seems to be breaking news on and off again, this Hamas-Israel hostage deal, the ceasefire deal. Let me give you my thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to Eric and to Jesse. My thoughts, and I really echo what Alan Dershowitz has been saying about this too, in a recent column he had in Gatestone. This is not a deal, this is extortion. They have a gun to the head of Israel, which is being pressured both by the Biden administration and, frankly, the Trump people to make a deal before Trump becomes president on January 20th, just a couple of days from now. I'm very troubled by this because the name of the game is really to destroy Hamas, because as long as Hamas exists, Israel is under threat. They've already said time and time again, gentlemen, that what's going to happen is they'll keep coming back and back and back until they win what they want, which is the extinction of the state of Israel and Islamist entity throughout the territory of the sovereign state of Israel. That's their goal. They can't be trusted. They can yes you to death all you want. As soon as they get what they want, they'll do what they want to do. They're going to be turning over dead bodies, broken people, for terrorists, for murderers, for rapists, for arsonists, for people who have plotted for years to destroy Israel. So for a handful of people, they'll get out hundreds or maybe thousands of people. If there's one lesson to be learned, is it cannot negotiate with terrorists. That just encourages people to grab more people, hold them as hostage, put the gun to decent people's heads, and force them to capitulate. Israel, I believe, would not capitulate, but it's under enormous pressure now where Trump said, I want those hostages back. So Trump, well-meaning as he is and was, has aided and abetted the Biden pressure campaign against Israel. I want these people back. I desperately want these people back. But I also desperately don't want to release people, once again, to have power, to rearm, to regroup, to re-recruit, and launch yet another existential attack against the state of Israel. Eric, your thoughts?
So I have a different perspective on this deal, and I take a second seat to no one on being hawkish against Israel's enemies. The first point I would make is, let's remember, the deal is wildly popular in Israel. Over 60% of the Israeli public supports doing the deal. The other point I would make is, this is as much about Iran as it is about Hamas. On October 7th, Iran attacked Israel, and they used Hamas as its weapon of choice. And everything and regardless of whether or not there's a deal to give back hostages, to release prisoners, to get back hostages, or no deal, unless and until there's regime change in Iran, this history is going to repeat itself. But the other thing to remember, everybody seems to be conflating the fact that there are three phases to the deal. There's not one deal. There's not one phase. Israel, one of the chief negotiating points that Israel achieved and refused to move on and won on the point, it would not be a halt to the war. All it is a pause to the war. Israel has the right to go back to war at any time it wants if Hamas breaks the deal. And that's where Trump comes in. Remember, the first phase of the deal is Israel gets back 33 hostages. The names were just released a few minutes ago of who's going to be returned, but we still don't know how many of them are dead or alive. And just to tell you how low-life savages Hamas is, 2 of the Israelis being returned were 6 months and 1 year old when they were taken. That's how despicable these people are. But in any event, so the Israelis will get back 33 hostages, some dead, some alive, we don't know which, and they will indeed release a few hundred Palestinian prisoners / terrorists, many of whom are serving life sentences for murdering Israelis. And people correctly point out that Yahya Sinwar was one of the prisoners exchanged for Gilad Shalit in 2011, the Israeli soldier that had been captured in 2006. There's a very important fundamental difference between Gaza in 2025 and Gaza in 2011 when the Gilad Shalit deal was made. Israel had completely withdrawn from Gaza in 2005 and had no presence in Gaza. And when Sinwar went back, there was no Israeli presence at all in Gaza. So they had no idea and no ability to monitor what was going on. They had no human intelligence as to what was going on in Gaza. Today, Israel is all over Gaza. They have destroyed the tunnels. They have leveled the cities. They know exactly where everyone is. Obviously, they haven't gotten back all the hostages, but their intelligence is far superior to what it was back in 2011. The notion that you're going to be able to release, Hamas is going to be able to welcome home these prisoners, and then they will start building tunnels again, is nonsense. They just won't be able to. The Israelis are there. At the end of the first phase, as you enter the second phase, Israel will still be in control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt and Sinai. That is the corridor, that is the border through which all these weapons have been moving and were shipped surreptitiously into Gaza. There's no way for Gaza, for Hamas to rearm. They're making these makeshift weapons they have now. It's going to be very difficult for them to be able to put up any sort of meaningful resistance. And once you get to phase 2, this is where Trump makes the difference. Israel reluctantly agreed to the deal back in May when Biden first proposed it. They were not enthusiastic at all and probably would not have passed the Security Council in Israel to get it approved. Because in phase 2, there has to be security arrangements for Israel before this can go any further. Israel will still be there. The military will still be there. And if you can't reach an agreement on security for Israel, they will not withdraw, and they will be able to go back to war. The reason why the Israelis didn't trust Biden was because they anticipated correctly, in my view, that once they got to phase 2, Biden would put pressure on Israel to make more concessions beyond what the original deal had been agreed to. With Trump, the Israelis have comfort in believing that he is on Israel's side, and if he puts pressure on anyone, he will put pressure on Hamas. Let's remember some of the testimony we just heard on the Hill for some of these confirmation hearings. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, could not have been clearer when he said that he hopes Israel kills every last Hamas terrorist. You'd never hear that from a Biden appointment. Marco Rubio, who's going to be our Secretary of State, is one of the foremost foreign policy experts in the United States, and he has built that reputation in large part and being an unwavering supporter of the Jewish state. Michael Waltz, who's going to be Donald Trump's national security advisor, was very clear when he said in a recent interview that if Hamas violates the agreement an iota, we will support Israel going back in and doing what they need to do. We will have Israel's back. You would never hear that from any Biden supporter. So it's phase 2. That's really going to be the telling point as to whether or not this deal is going to come to total fruition. At no point does Israel give up the right to fight, to go in. And the concern was that the Biden team would make them give that up. So at a minimum, the Israelis are getting back 33 of its own people. Israel's a country of 9 million people, 7 million Jews. 33 people, 33 hostages means a lot. That's a very high number. There'll still be around 60, 62, 63 still left in Gaza. And hopefully we will be able to get them out. But Israel has also made clear, as has supposedly the Biden administration, but certainly the Trump administration, that at the end of this process, if it is to succeed, Hamas will have no role in governing. If the Biden team is still in place, there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure in the Israelis' mind, that they would overlook that fact. They would allow Hamas to have a role in governing. With the Trump team, Hamas will have no role in governing. Now, this may not result in a final deal. We may not get past phase 2 or phase 3. But in that case, Israel at least will have gotten back 33 of its people. Yes, some of these animals would have been released, but their ability to function in a way that Yahya Sinwar was able to operate is just not possible. But the most important point, coming back to the original point I made, this is about Iran. This is not so much about Hamas. This is about Iran. And what we hope for is that there's been a side deal between the Trump administration and the Israelis, that you do this, we will now be able to focus on Tehran. And if you want to go attack the Iranians, hopefully we'll do it with them. Hopefully American planes will be in the air with Israeli planes. We'll do it with them. And until there's regime change in Iran, this is going to repeat itself. And the last point I would make is the revolution in the Middle East is possible only with the expansion of the Abraham Accords and Saudi Arabia signing on. We need to give the Saudis some cover. And the Saudis could not possibly enter the Abraham Accords, which will be revolutionary. It'll end the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will expand Israel's ability to function in the international Muslim world, in Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Pakistan.
All right. Eric, let me turn to Jesse. We have a few minutes left in this segment. Now we can pick it up again, but I want to get Jesse. So Jesse, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that Eric articulated the benefits of this deal. No deal is ever going to be perfect, but I think there are a couple of things that I would like to add to this. Number one, the conditions on the ground are a little bit different now. Hezbollah has been basically ripped apart. Syria has fallen. That has assisted, and that's because of the work of Israel in taking this to action. Also, Israel's ability to demonstrate their military being able to go into Iran almost unencumbered and come back safely to defend itself, and a very proportional response that they made back during the course of this war has also rattled this situation. And I think Eric points it out. The biggest difference here is the change of leadership here in the United States. The Trump administration, his nominees and designees on foreign policy, his use of language, both economically and on foreign policy, by saying that they'll be held to pay if the hostages are not returned before he takes the oath of office, is what accelerated this. The linchpin here was the meeting, I believe, with Netanyahu and President Trump's, special envoy for the Middle East, where I think Eric referred to may possibly a side deal. I think that those assurances for phase 2 of this agreement and the future regime change, or to continue to isolate and take away Iran's ability to wage terrorism in the region, either by itself, financially, or through its proxies, is what made the Netanyahu move to accept this, as well as his Security Council. And I think Eric also pointed out, there's politics in every decision. Right now, it's 60. This deal was 60% popularity rate in the state of Israel. That was not the case back in May. And I do believe that one of the reasons here is because a true partner is just hours away from returning to the Oval Office with his designees and nominees on foreign policy that doesn't separate Israel and the United States. It strengthens the bond and the ties.
Well, I have to tell you something. I think Eric's points are very well taken. I think your points are very well taken. But as both of you know, one of the big issues in the Middle East is the ability to show that you're the stronger horse, that you've been vindicated as a power. And Hamas, at least from the public relations point of view, is already declaring this as a victory and that they will continue the action. I am hopeful, as Jesse pointed out, that there is a side agreement that's not being talked about. And the side agreement will be a joint venture by Israel and the United States to once and for all go after the nuclear program of Iran and maybe even get us regime change there, to bring Iran back to the community of civilized nations and not in a hegemonic, despotic, religious theocracy that believes that everybody's going to heaven by killing innocent people. That's totally justifiable to rape, torture, chop the heads off, and burn alive living human beings in the name of Islamist politics and theology. I'm very hopeful.
Richard,
yes.
Richard, can I just make one quick point about your strong horse point?
Sure.
You're 100% right. You know, one of my favorite movies of all time is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And there's a wonderful scene when King Arthur cuts off the arms and the legs of the Black Knight. And the stub of a man is standing there and he's saying, "Come back, I'll bite your legs off." That's what you got with Hamas. They could stand up and they can claim all they want, that they've won, they've had a victory. But any sensate human being, particularly leaders in the Arab world, in Riyadh, in Amman, in Damascus, in Cairo, they know who won.
But you said something very interesting. You said sensate, and you're talking about the leadership. The Arab street is not necessarily sensate.
There's no such thing. This thing about the Arab street is nonsense. Have you seen anybody rising up in protest in Saudi Arabia or in Jordan or in Damascus or in Lebanon, calling, siding with Hamas? There's been silence in the Arab world.
Yeah, but amongst the people in Gaza,
they want Hamas destroyed because they know Hamas is Iran.
Agreed. So, but amongst the population in Gaza, they're already trying to re-recruit.
That's fine. And recruit with what? There's going to be no influx of weapons anymore. They're going to, they'll find bits and pieces of munitions and they'll put them together. But Israel is currently on the ground. They're currently there. There's not going to be much they can do. To your point about the strong horse, the Arabs know who the strong horse is in this war, and nobody wants Hamas to be governing in Gaza because Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. They pose a direct threat to the Gulf states, to Egypt, and they are rooting for the Israelis to win, and that is why there has been silence. But we just have to give the Saudis some cover for them to enter the Abraham Accords. I have not seen any uprising in the streets of the Arab world. I've seen more at Columbia University. There I've seen it. In the streets of New York, there I've seen it, but not in the Arab world.
Fair enough. Point well taken, Counselor. We'll be back in a few moments with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Joining us in our second segment will be Jane Menton. We'll be talking about this religious cult of environmentalism and its threats to the viability of New York City and New York State, and what Jane is doing about this to fight back against this crazy agenda of the far left. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few moments for more interesting and important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Joining us now is our special guest, my friend, Jane Menton. Jane is a community leader, a thought leader, a public policy leader. She and her father have been leading a fight, which I've been trying to be a little bit helpful on, in fighting against this secular religion of extreme environmentalism, which does not satisfy the needs for energy in the city and state of New York, which threatens the viability of energy, which means no heat in winter, no air conditioning in the summer, computers going down through all operations, whether it's financial or hospitals. The bill that Jane and I have been working on with her father and others is this Local Law 97. Jane, welcome to the show. We're delighted to have you. Would you please?
Thank you so much.
Would you please tell us this whole problem? What is Local Law 97? How does it relate to the state law, and why are they incompatible? The state law is the so-called Community Leadership Bill, and why we should be concerned.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so I found out about this law when I joined the board of my co-op. It doesn't sound, it's an emissions reduction act. It was signed into law on Earth Day 2019 with a deadline. The first deadline didn't come up until 2024. The next deadline is 2030. So I think they imagined to themselves by the time we got to those dates, we would have the technology to do reduce our emissions to the degree that they were saying that they needed them to be reduced. It doesn't sound, it says emissions reduction, doesn't sound like an electrification mandate. But what I realized when I looked at my buildings, I was on the board of my co-op, my building's emissions, 75% of those emissions were coming from our natural gas, heat, and hot water infrastructure. And the only way to reduce those emissions by anything like 40% would be to completely retrofit an electric heating system into our building. And this, only because I sort of had a background in understanding these energy issues, as you were saying, I've been working with my father on some of this stuff for a long time, did I kind of understand that. And I realized, so at the same time, simultaneously as this local law, this city law is going into effect, these deadlines starting in 2030. The state law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, says that our electric grid, which also is fossil fuel based at the present, most of New York City's electricity, 80% of it at least, is coming from fossil fuels. needs to be transitioned to renewable energy, ideally wind and solar resources. They had many, many plans to build offshore wind facilities. And that transition deadline is also 2030. So as this summer, or as those deadlines started to approach this summer, Governor Hochul was saying, "Oh, actually, there's no way we're going to be They said a standard of 70% of the electricity is going to come from these renewable sources by 2030. Governor Hochul is saying, "No way are we going to beat that deadline." Meanwhile, in New York City, local law is progressing as planned. They're putting buildings in a position where if they don't start hiring engineers and doing reports to assess how their building is going to comply with Local Law 97, we have to pay penalties, annual penalties every year that are going to get increasingly more severe over the next decade.
What does that do to residential housing, whether you're talking about co-ops, condos, or rental units?
Well, I mean, the cost to shareholders it's an affordability issue. It's a tremendous affordability issue, just not only to do these renovations, which could cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to go into every single unit and try to take out all of that natural gas infrastructure from heat to hot water to cooking. And
when you say unit, you mean apartments, don't you? Not buildings.
Apartments.
Individual apartments. So you're talking about
apartments.
So you're talking about in the tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars per building.
I'm talking about millions per building, tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars per resident. So absolutely unaffordable for the residents and the shareholders. All of that money would have to be levied either through loans, which means the buildings would be taking on an enormous debt load, or from maintenance increases and other, ways of getting the bill to the residents, so people are going to see their just cost of living to do these renovations skyrocket. Meanwhile, at the same time, as they're saying, you have to put in all this electric infrastructure. We're gonna run your whole building on electricity. Your elevators are going to be electricity. Your cooking is going to be electricity. Your heat's going to be electricity. Your hot water is going to be electricity. Everything's going to be electricity. They're completely undermining the reliability of New York City's electric grid. They're saying, we're going to have renewable sources. We're going to start shutting down our fossil fuel plants, which provide the most resilient and reliable energy that we currently have. We're going to replace it with intermittent sources like wind and sun. We don't have the battery backup facility set up yet. We don't have anything in place like that. We shut down our nuclear facility, Indian Point. Like, where is this energy even coming from? They have no plan. And they're saying your whole life is going to be based on electricity. Everything that you do in your day-to-day life is going to require reliable, guaranteed, functioning electricity, and we have no idea where it's coming from. How is this possibly going to work? There's no answer.
Jesse.
Jane, it's great. Thank you so much. I've been reading up on a lot of your fight here. Where is the fight right now in terms I have actually two questions. Where is the fight right now in terms of this local law? And number two, the hypocrisy is unreal here, where everyone wants to talk about the science except when it comes to energy independence here. And I believe that most of New York City's energy comes from different states, whether it be Canada, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, which are in some cases are dirtier energy sources than the ones that are being banned here in our communities, and rising the costs for our property owners and our residents who want to seek some affordable dwellings.
Yes. So the biggest fight right now on Local Law 97 is really taking place in the co-op and condo community, where residents are starting to realize, mostly, as I was saying, the unaffordability. I mean, where I live in Queens, I live in Sunnyside, Queens. This is not, a Tony neighborhood. It's not Park Avenue. Residents just they simply cannot face 50 to 100% increases in their monthly bills. Not to mention, their building took on a debt load in the millions of dollars, what that would mean for their apartment. And for many people, this is the biggest equity that they have, in their life. So that, as residents become more and more aware, and I've been trying really hard to spread that awareness. We've been doing town halls in these different neighborhoods in Queens because so often people just don't even know. The deadlines have been so far in the distant future with so many people just hoping that it all falls apart. And my primary goal is to give the shareholders this information so that we have an opportunity to shift this legislation. We need to return that democratic power to people to say to their politicians, listen, you can't let this go forward. Like, you're affecting average New Yorkers, you're affecting our quality of life and our affordability. And as you're saying about electricity, if New York actually shut down its fossil fuel electric plants, you are 100% right. We would have to import energy from other states, from Canada, something. And the biggest problem I see with that is that those states are already going to be strapped for resources as nationwide electric mandates continue to come into place. You know, especially under Biden's EPA, maybe we'll see some of this rolled back under the Trump administration. But there's electric car mandates all across the U.S. The
grid's not going to be able to sustain it, number one. And number two, the way you get the electric grid going is you need fossil fuels to get them going. That's always been the defect with electric cars. So you're just adding to that.
You're just adding to that. And the same thing is true of Local Law 97. You think of electrifying a building sounds like we're going to be reducing carbon emissions. But the fact of the matter is, if we tripled demand for electricity in New York City, the only way that we could guarantee that electricity is available would be to rapidly build fossil fuel electricity plants. That nuclear would take decades. You know, wind and solar are intermittent. We do not have a third technology that currently exists that could fill that gap. Okay. So the hypocrisy is startling. I mean,
but it's a nightmare. But it's really a nightmare. In other words, haven't we learned the lesson from California? It's nice to have these woke, progressive ideological commitments to environment, but you have to have a sustainable energy source, and you have to do the basics of governing, which is making the place livable. Eric.
Yes.
So I have two questions. This is really fascinating. Thank you for bringing this to everyone's attention. The first is, are there any current elected officials in New York, whether state or city, that are taking this issue on head on and siding with co-op owners and little people like you and me? That's the first question. And if they are, who are they? And the second is there a federal role in this? Because not for nothing, Lee Zeldin is now going to be the head of the EPA. Lee is, very familiar with these mandates and these laws, from his run for governor and formerly congressman on Long Island. So is there a federal role in this?
So I am very hopeful, cautiously hopeful, that Trump's EPA rolls back a lot of the regulatory legislate that we've seen over the last 4 years. That will help. Trump has said, he's like, oil is America's gold, and he's come out and been very pro fossil fuel. So hopefully that makes a big difference nationwide. But I do fear that New York City politicians, where this environmental idealism is still so entrenched, might go the opposite way, where they really double down on these mandates as a way to resist the Trump agenda. So that's a big fear that I have. And to that point, the biggest spokesperson in city council on this issue has been Vicky Palladino, who is a city council member from Eastern Queens.
A Republican.
She's a Republican. Right. And because she was the first most vocal advocate on this issue, I feel there's been so much resistance inside city council to either side with her and come together in a bipartisan agreement. They just don't want to be seen as taking a position with a Republican, and especially somebody who has been quote MAGA. Yeah. So what's crazy is we currently have an intro that kind of came out of the grassroots movement that's going on in Queens among the co-op community called Intro 772. And that legislation specifically designed just to protect affordable co-ops. It has a assessed value cap at $55,000. And it also factors in, like, if buildings have done other efficiency measures like sub-metering or adding solar panels or having green space, and all these things would all go towards you not having to pay penalties.
My problem is, because I like to look at the whole picture, and when I talk about New York City, I'm also talking about New York State, since New York City is a key economic engine for the entire state. I'm always concerned about forcing people out of New York, people voting by van to get the hell out of here because it's not affordable and it's not workable, and that's a real problem. And
that would absolutely happen in this case. Absolutely.
So the key that people need to know: this is not just a co-op issue. This is not just a condo issue. This is all residents. The penalties will be enormous because if I own a building and I'm renting it to my tenants and I start getting hit with all these mandates and all these fines, what do I have to do? It's a matter of simple economics. I have to pass the cost back down to my tenants one way or another, or I have to shut down my building.
Not if it's rent controlled, you can't.
Wow. Now you have the problem.
You're going to see landlords just abandon their buildings.
That's right. So you're going to have the Bronx. You're going to have the old Bronx's burning days. People are going to abandon buildings. So what are you going to do for housing? And if you don't have housing, people are going to get the hell out of New York. Don't these people understand how this all works together? And Jesse, I just want to point out, and Jane hit on something that's very interesting with respect to the city council, because it's a crazy left-wing Democratic-dominated body. And hopefully in the 2025 elections, we'll get some common sense Democrats and some more Republicans. But I happened to have a conversation yesterday with Senator George Borrello, who's one of the leaders of the New York State Senate, a Republican. And I've also talked to Senator Ort, the minority leader for the Republicans. I think it's very, very important for the Republican Party, Jesse, and you're one of the great leaders of the party, to get this message out. It's not just a political campaign issue. It's an issue about the continued viability of the state of New York. And we got to get this absolute power that the Democrats have up in Albany to have these mandates that are just not feasible, uneconomic, and drive our population out. What do you say, Jesse?
Absolutely. This is one of those issues, those pocketbook issues that affect every middle class New Yorker, regardless of party affiliation. And it's one of those issues that can be grassroots in nature, that can help Republicans break into more seats in the city council, because it affects the average New York City resident. The one question I want to ask, and please excuse my ignorance, is there an ability through initiative of a referendum, Jane, to try and reverse this or repeal it?
Let me answer. That's a legal question. The answer is New York State is not a so-called progressive state in the sense of the old Hiram Johnson from California and La Follette family in Wisconsin or Oregon or Washington State, where you can put things on the ballot. It's very, very limited what can be put on the ballot. It can't be initiated, Jesse, by petition in the state of New York. Okay. The only thing that gets on the ballot, very limited numbers under city charter, okay, and very limited numbers under state law. The city council can put something on the ballot. The Charter Revision Commission can do it. It's worth an effort to try to get somebody to do that. But remember, you have a city council controlled by left-wing Democrats. They're not going to put this on as a referendum, right? Mm-hmm. And you have a state.
Maybe there was an initiative and referendum.
No, believe me,
in Suffolk County here.
No. You guys have a better situation than we have. Jane, we're going to have to sign off. Please tell our audience, because this has been a fascinating, compelling conversation, how people can volunteer to help you, what they can do to organize, where they can make contributions. How do we do this?
Okay, so I set up a website. It's called the Western Queens Co-op Coalition. It's westernqueenscc.org. It has an about page. It has resources that you can share with shareholders about our electric grid, about the work that we've been doing in Queens, about the town hall that we hosted. It has a GoFundMe, donate. And if you write to that, and there's a contact me, or if you submit a contact form, you can contact me directly. And I'd love to have volunteers help out and help me spread the word on this.
Okay, I think it's very important, because I don't want people to think, oh, it's only a Western Queens issue. This is a statewide issue. This is a New York City issue. So I think what I'd urge you to do, and you should be talking to political leadership people, great leaders like Jesse and great lawyers like Eric, broaden the message to people, broaden the contact information so it doesn't look like it's just a local Western Queens issue.
Yes, we are working on doing that. This last year, this was the website that I had set up to do my local organizing. So we're shifting it to be a broader, bigger initiative. I'm just teasing this right now, but we have another piece of legislation that we're working on that would encompass all the buildings in New York City to try and protect them from the implementation of this law under these circumstances. But this was on short notice. This was what I could come up with for right now.
Well,
so hopefully,
Jane, you do great work on short notice. Long notice, I think you'll be even better. We look forward to bringing you back on Let the Record Show. And we want to thank you for being with us and educating the people of the city and the state of New York. Thank you.
This was great, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With us was Jane Menton, who's leading the fight to protect the viability of the city of New York and the state of New York, with Chairman Jesse Garcia, Republican Party, and Eric Levine. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in but a few moments with the final segment of this week's Let the Record Show.
This is Let the Record Show. This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We are back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the vice chair of the New York State Party, as well as the county chair of the Republican Party out on Long Island, Suffolk County. Eric Levine, our good friend, a distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist, is with us. Great lawyer, good friend, and a friend of ours, Eric, a very distinguished congressman, a great leader, a real expert on national security and intelligence issues, Mike Turner, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives, who did great work understanding the threats of Russia, Islamist fundamentalism, of Iran, has just been relieved of his position as chair of the Intelligence Committee in the United States House of Representatives, replaced by somebody named Crawford, who I don't know, gentlemen. But why was this done? My own theory is that this was done at the behest of these neo-isolationists, part of the Republican Party, who put pressure on Johnson through Trump to get rid of Turner. And who's behind this? You have the guy who used to be on Fox, who's no longer there. What's his name? I've tried to repress it because I'm so angry with him. You know, the pro-Putin guy who's against the Ukraine. You probably have other people.
Tucker Carlson?
Tucker, that's right. I repressed his name because he upsets me so much.
Tucker Carlson's an affirmatively dangerous guy.
He's very dangerous. Right. And I'm not happy, by the way, with the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard. I think one of the reasons they blew out Turner is because they were afraid that Turner would hold Tulsi Gabbard's feet to the fire. What are your thoughts about this, Eric?
Well, as we all know, I am a big fan and supporter of Speaker Johnson. I think he has been.
And we all are. Jesse is. Yeah, I am. Go ahead.
Right. And on this one, I respectfully disagree. I think that Mike Turner was doing an outstanding job as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I would have liked for him to have continued. I've not spoken to the speaker about the reasons behind it. It's all speculation. But I certainly share your concern regarding, Tulsi Gabbard. The biggest difference between someone like Tulsi Gabbard and, let's say, RFK or Pete Hegseth, for people who are concerned about Trump appointments, is at least with Pete Hegseth and RFK, when they make a decision and they do something, it's out there for the world to see, and people can comment on it in real time. By definition, if you're in charge of the intelligence, if you're in charge of intelligence, you're by definition behind closed doors.
You're a spook. You're a spook. Yeah. You're in charge of the spooks.
you're taking all the reports from all the intelligence agencies and you're synthesizing them and presenting them to the president every day for his daily briefing.
So you can edit in or edit out or editorialize.
Exactly, and there's no oversight by the American people. No one can see what that person is doing. So you want to have good oversight in Congress, and that's where I think Mike Turner would have been, assuming Tulsi Gabbard is confirmed, and that remains an open question. I think Mike Turner would have been a good check on that. I don't know the other fellow, the new person who's been put in his place. Maybe he's outstanding as well. I just don't know. But I do know that Mike Turner was excellent in his position, and I would have been perfectly happy if he continued.
Jesse, what are your thoughts on this?
Like all of you, I'm not really sure what the circumstances behind that, but I think we probably could look at a couple of things on the ground and see what could be and maybe connect dots. Listen, we all agree this government, this country is much better off with a Speaker Johnson on the first ballot to be elected instead of grinding this country to a halt. It's Washington, D.C. They call it a swamp for a reason. It's still going to have vestiges of that despite the sweep that has come in of this election. And if, by definition, politics is also deal making. And if Speaker Johnson had to make a deal for this purpose, and the fact that the outgoing committee chair went without really a lot of gruff, certainly he put the interest of the speaker and the country ahead of his own ambitions, and certainly is probably in line for a leadership role and as a special advisor to the speaker. So I think that I understand your concerns here and there. This, for me, having been a staffer and a chief of staff in Congress, it's like the business as usual type of deal making that has to take place when you have a majority that's so slim. Because what's the most important thing? Was a protracted speakership vote going to serve the country better, or was switching out a committee chair when you still have Representative Crawford there as a senior member of the caucus and a senior voice respected by both sides to be able to express that, and especially express that directly to the speaker and the leadership team in the House of Representatives.
The problem I have with that, and I understand everything you just said about the politics of Capitol Hill and the White House. This is my problem. I have no idea who Crawford is. When I say I have no idea, I really mean I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But I have every idea who Mike Turner is. Eric knows him very well. We've had lunch with him. We've spoken with him. We've had him in person over at the Red Apple offices with Cassimatidis. I've spent a lot of time with him. Eric spent a lot of time with him. This is a first-rate member of Congress. This is one of the best chairs they had in the House of Representatives. This is an outstanding man who knows his business, and you're losing real institutional memory about all the threats and the crises that's coming to America. This is not the time to replace somebody of Turner's ability and expertise to be moved aside. That's my view on that. Number two, I'm very concerned about this power of these neo-isolationists around Trump. There's some really good people, and Eric talked about it in the first segment, some really good people coming in who understand that you have to have leadership by America. You have Rubio as Secretary of State. You have Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. You have Congressman Mike Waltz for NSA. All be wonderful, wonderful people doing the job well in protecting and defending this country. On the other hand, you have the Tucker Carlson crew, which includes Gabbard, and I think it may also include Vivek Ramaswamy. I think that's and maybe even the Vice President Vance. I think it's dangerous. We cannot appease, we cannot close our eyes to the real threats about us. The New York, in today's Wall Street Journal, amazing editorial raising the questions and the concerns that the three of us have been talking about why are they doing this. And Johnson, by doing this, by capitulating, has sold out one of his loyalist lieutenants, Chairman Mike Turner. Let's switch gears. TikTok, the Supreme Court of the United States has said that the law enacted by Congress, signed by the president, which said you either are going to have a ban of TikTok effective on Sunday, or you have to have a transfer of ownership and control. Because let's be clear, TikTok is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Let me say it again. The Chinese Communist Party controls TikTok. This is not just a social media thing where you get to do whatever people do. They have a way of getting all the information they want out of you signing on and doing this. And they are our enemies. They're not adversaries. They're our enemies dedicated to destruction of this country, the undermining of this country. Now, I understand that there's provision in the legislation that they'll keep it afloat if there's an active deal going on. But so far, I hear nothing about an active deal going on, and that could go on for 90 days. But I think TikTok has got to go as long as it's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Eric, what are your thoughts?
I agree 100%. I mean, it is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, what's controlled by this entity called ByteDance, which is an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. They do two things that are quite dangerous. They mine for personal information on everyone and who subscribes, and they keep a huge database on Americans. And the second thing they do is they put out all kinds of disinformation to young people. I mean, just one example. If a young girl goes on TikTok and wants to start seeing things about diets, there's information that's put out there that turns girls into anorexics. That they started internalizing some of the stuff that they're told, and it's quite dangerous. It makes they have websites out there that for disinformation makes young people suicidal. So it really is, depending on the algorithms, some of the stuff they put out there is quite dangerous. If you go on TikTok and you put in Israel-Hamas war, 80% of the links that'll pop up are pro-Hamas. So it makes it really has to be owned by an American entity, independent of any foreign government. And I support the legislation, and I think it should be sold, and it should be owned by an American or shut down.
Jesse, your thoughts?
Absolutely. It's the law of the land. I think the Supreme Court was very efficient in its decision, very, very poignant in its decision. It's not a free speech issue. They agreed with the intent of the legislation that it was for national security and matters, and it would deal with ownership. I think we can just save this issue very quickly. I think it's cowardice of the Biden administration to punt this to the upcoming administration based on the fact that they have making wholesale changes, whether it be 2,500 pardons of violent criminals, or pardoning their family members, or all these new executive orders to add as obstacles for us to for Trump to secure the border or make us energy independent. Now, this one he punts on, and it's amazing that he does that, but not surprising. I think that Trump will have to look at where it is as the airing of this show. It'll be the 19th, and TikTok will go dark in America. It's my understanding that there are I've heard the names of Elon Musk and two other people who have placed on the table $20 billion cash bids to acquire the American segment of TikTok. Whether or not that meets the technical definition within the legislation that allows President Trump to pause this ban for 90 days, I'm not sure. But I know that Trump has changed a bit when it comes to TikTok and such. And one of his last phone calls that he had with one of our foreign leaders before his inaugural tomorrow was with the leader of China, President Xi, and I use president in quotes, more like a dictator, regarding a number of issues, including TikTok. So it'll be interesting to see how this is handled in the next few hours.
I think that's right. Look, with all due respect to President Trump, and I've supported him on issues over the years, and I continue to. This is not just a simple deal to make nice to Xi. Xi is our enemy, has to be confronted as our enemy. This is a device used to subvert us. Even this week, we just found out there's more hacking of our government institutions, both by the Chinese and by the Russians, including Janet Yellen's sites. I mean, let's get real. These people are not our friends. They're dedicated to our destruction. They want to be the dominant world power. TikTok is a device that enables them to have advantage against us. It's got to be stopped. And Trump has got to get hard on this issue and move away from any kind of accommodation with the Chinese. The Chinese cannot control TikTok directly or indirectly.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
Hi, this is Joe from Vanta. In today's digital world, compliance regulations are changing constantly, and earning customer trust has never mattered more. Vanta helps companies get compliant fast and stay secure with the most advanced AI, automation, and continuous monitoring out there. So whether you're a startup going for your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing enterprise managing vendor risk, Vanta makes it quick, easy, and scalable. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. Get started at Vanta.com.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz.
Spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Or we will face the consequences. Let's switch gears, gentlemen. There was just a decision by a jury where an individual who was rescuing people out of Afghanistan was attacked on CNN as a greedy son of a gun who was making money off the deal, shaking people down, getting Afghans to pay, $75,000 a head to get them out of Afghan after the withdrawal by Biden, the so-called disastrous withdrawal where we abandoned our allies and people were jumping on the wings of planes to get out of there because they knew their lives were about to be extinguished. And there were some people doing everything they can to help our allies and people who worked with us, with the Americans in Afghanistan before we abandoned them. And what happens? CNN does a so-called expose, names this one gentleman and attacks him. And it turns out they were wrong. They didn't know what they were talking about. He wasn't making money on this deal. He was doing what he needed to help the people. The jury just came back and found CNN guilty of defamation. Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what more I could say to this. I mean, I'm glad CNN's feet were held to the fire. Thank goodness the case was brought in Panama City, Florida, and not in New York City or the Bronx. I mean, the individual was able to get a fair hearing. So he was awarded, I think, $4 million in lost compensation, $1 for damages, but now they
have to do punitives now.
Right, that's the next phase. They're hearing evidence now for punitive damages, which hopefully will be an astronomical number. The idea that the mainstream media thinks they could do or say whatever they want about individuals without any regard for the truth or the impact on their lives, those days have to end. Obviously, this guy was doing something that wasn't consistent with the narrative at CNN, where they wanted to have some sort of story, and they were going to get it out there no matter what the truth was. And thank goodness they were called on it.
Jesse, your thoughts?
I give, I'm happy for U.S. Navy veteran Zachary Young, who was the one who brought this case. I think it was courageous. I think he put all his chips in the middle of the table here, because this is the way to get to the attention of the legacy media. You have to hit them in the pocketbook. Remember, this decision, this $5 million decision, and then we'll see what the punitive damages are later on, comes on the heels of ABC doing a $14 million settlement with Trump on reports by Stephanopoulos and using language that he knew was wrong, was warned he was wrong about this. I watched and followed this case because this is important to put forward in front of the American people, because it demonstrates that the bias that we all thought was there but was hidden a bit or was balanced out when we were growing up is gone. These are all, if you want to, these are all individuals, they're elitists that want to tell us what the truth is, how to live our lives, and what's good for us and what's bad.
What their truth is, not the real truth.
Their truth is. Exactly. Yeah. What their form of the truth is, their set of facts. And I think that this is the best way to do it. You're going to do it by two ways. You're going to do it by people turning them off, which they've been doing that. CNN has been suffering in ratings, so has NBC. And you're going to do it by hitting them in the pocketbook.
MSNBC is at risk of being sold because they have no viewers.
Exactly. It's at the risk of being sold because of that. And here's what it is. Listen, it's going to have to make these, and now it's funny because now the legacy media, the reporters, whether it be the Washington Post or in this or New York Times or the LA Times or anywhere else, now they're saying, oh, they're succumbing to Trump and they're becoming under the thumb of Trump. No, what happened is the last 10 years of political campaign coverage, the last 2 years of coverage of the government, their part and parcel partnership with Biden to cover up COVID, to cover up his own cognitive status and
his own grafting, his family's grafting.
His own grafting. You know, we go with the New York Post's laptop story being shut down and only to be found to be accurate. This is those people, those elitists, those corporate heads now saying, you know what? The market is changing. And we better make big changes to meet our market. Because right now there are a lot of outlets where you can get media. And some of them are dangerous. A lot of them are dangerous. I think that social media is a tool, but it's very dangerous in how it can distribute misinformation. It can be used as a character assassination. The internet's dangerous, but it also is a viable tool against those who will try to basically brainwash us for their own corporate or political needs.